Welcome to another edition of the It's Cavalier podcast. It's your boy Mac. Joining me today is my good friend Mikey McNuggets of Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. How's it going, Mikey?
We're doing good, Mac. We're going to record a little later today, but we are currently sitting in a severe thunderstorm in downtown Cleveland. The Browns preseason game has been postponed for the time being. So I said, why wait till later when I could talk and pass this rain delay with my guy Mac? So I'm glad to be doing this. Been too long. Been way too long.
Yeah, I mean, so much has happened since the last appearance on the pod, I feel like, or maybe not so much if you're a Cavs fan and finally got some stuff done. But man, it's been too long. But that being said, let's just jump right into it, because this offseason, after seeing target after target being snatched up left and right by different teams around the league, especially in the Eastern Conference, where there's been a ton of alignment along the way. And for the Cavs in particular, it just felt like, man, this guy's gone, this guy's gone, this guy's gone. What are we going to do? What are they waiting for? What are they planning? And lo and behold, they've been working the phones, trying to put together some type of deal behind the scene this entire time, which is why you saw this trade for Peyton Watson linking together 5 teams, which required the movement of Dennis Schroeder for flexibility. It required Max Strus to be that final piece. And we'll get to Max here in just a second, just because I don't want to downplay everything that he brought to the table. But this had been cooking for what feels like forever at this point. And now that the Cavaliers finally have Peyton Watson, I just want to know, what are you initially looking forward to in getting Watson alongside James Harden, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, and company?
A lot. Peyton Watson's a good basketball player, Mac, and he's only getting better. You can see his growth from his freshman year at UCLA to playing sparingly as a rookie in Denver to this season in his 4th year with the Nuggets, taking on a much bigger offensive role, and particularly when Jokic was out, showing off his ability to create, which people didn't really know if he had inside of him.
Yeah.
Granted, small sample size, I think it was only 14 games, but you'd rather have a small sample size of a good outcome than no sample size and make it a complete question mark. His three-point volume went up. He still needs to take more threes to maximize himself as a 3-and-D wing, but from the corner, which is where he's going to get a lot of his three-point attempts, playing alongside James and Donovan. He was in the 97th percentile, shot 52.1% from the corner last season, which is one of the best marks in the entire NBA. The 5th starter with the Cavs' current lineup with Allen, Mobley, Mitchell, and Harden. They're going to get stuck in the corner on a lot of offensive possessions. So you need to be able to make threes to be a nice fit alongside those guys. And he does. He's also their best defensive player outside of Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, their best perimeter defender today. I don't think it's a question, Mac. And the
Not
kid's
at all.
22, 23 years old and getting better. He's trending upward. And they got him at $22 million a year, which I understand feels like a steep price to pay, and you had to give up a bunch of other things to acquire Peyton Watson. But isn't this what the Cavs and Cavs fans have been begging for a while? A wing with legitimate size and athleticism, who's young, who can grow with the rest of the guys on the team. I think he's a perfect fit. I understand the cost and the price to get him was a lot. But this is the guy Denver did not want to get rid of, and I want to emphasize this more than anything else. Denver did not want to get rid of Peyton Watson. They simply could not afford Peyton Watson. And they made the mistake of giving Christian Brown that 5-year, $125 million contract last year, which handcuffed them and made them unable to re-sign Peyton Watson. If the second apron was not a thing and they had the money, Peyton Watson would be back in the Denver Nuggets. The only reason he's not a member of the Denver Nuggets is because they simply could not afford him under the restraints of the second apron. And the Cavs were the beneficiary of this stupid CBA, which we could go down a whole other path. It's stupid, but in this case, it benefited the Cavs. Mac, getting LeBron was the home run, was a slam dunk for the Cavs this summer. It didn't happen, so I can't say this whole offseason has been a win. I'd rather have LeBron at $4 million than Peyton Watson at 22. It just is what it is. But considering LeBron chose Philadelphia and you had to pivot to plan B, I think this was as good of an outcome as humanly possible if you're Kobe Altman and the Cleveland Cavaliers.
It's a damn good outcome as far as I'm concerned, because if you look at with the exception of LeBron, right? He's an outlier because he chose the destination and he did so cheaply at that. That was an outlier. But to me, this is a great outcome because it did not cost you a member of your core 4. And I understand that there are folks out there that, number one, hated to lose Max Strus. Totally understandable. Veteran leadership is important. Volume shooting and spacing is important. This guy brought a winning mentality to the court at all times. That is all important. I will miss him. We'll get to him in just a minute. But as far as Peyton Watson is concerned, as you mentioned, this is what people have been clamoring for years. And so to me, it is worth the price of admission. It's worth the gamble. As they say, you got to pay the cost to be the boss. And for Peyton Watson, an ascending wing in today's league, that's just kind of the going rate these days, even if you feel like you're taking a chance. And I think there's a slight misconception with the season that he had. A lot of people point to the January that he basically was playing at an extremely high level, averaged, I want to say 21.9 points per game, 5.5 boards, 3 assists. But the real big stat for him during that stretch run was the 3-point shooting at 46.2%. He actually had a good stretch of games in the months leading up to that. In November, in December, he was in double digits and he was shooting pretty solidly while still getting a good amount of minutes out there. It's not like he was playing in garbage time. So I think that people, when we look at the gamble that they took, yes, you can say it's based upon one season's worth of games, but this is one of those rare cases where you can clearly see the fits. You knew what the Cavaliers needed. You know you needed to add athleticism. You needed to add size and versatility at wing, especially defensively, and the Cavaliers managed to do that without like ponying up a big piece like an Evan Mobley, which probably would have been the cost had they gone the Jaylen Brown route. Or for a player like Giannis, same thing. It would have been a much higher cost. And to me, Cavaliers couldn't necessarily go wrong with the way that they went about acquiring Peyton Watson, which it took a long time.
It did take a while.
It's going to end up being worth it.
Good things come to people who wait. And a couple of things on the Watson fit. Right, they needed a guy with size on the perimeter that can help mitigate some of the defensive liabilities of Harden and Mitchell. And now between Watson, Mobley, and Allen, that's a pretty damn good front court to hide a pretty bad defensive backcourt. Secondly, you have to, if you're playing alongside James Harden and Donovan Mitchell, know how to pick and choose your spots and move without the basketball, because you're just not going to get a ton of on-ball opportunities when those two have the usage rates they do and they play the offensive style they do.
Yep.
He played alongside Nikola Jokic, who is the best passing big man in the history of this league, a guy who has a usage rate that, I know the number's not as high as it is, but the entire offense runs through him. Jokic developed a certain level of trust in Watson this year in particular because of his willingness to move off ball, to read the defense, to make the right cut. If they're overplaying, go back door. If they're going under screens, to step back and shoot. You earn that trust from an MVP caliber player. Jokic doesn't just walk in with any rookie and say, oh, yeah, I trust you. We're not on the same page. But over the course of 4 seasons, they developed a level of chemistry to where Watson as a cutter was one of the most efficient cutters in basketball off Jokic passes. And Jokic passes had one of the highest field goal percent conversion rates of all his teammates to a Peyton Watson. Now, granted, a lot of those are back cuts for finishes at the rim.
Yeah.
I don't care. It still proves that he learned how to play off of a guy like that, which will only help him make a seamless transition into this Kenny Atkinson offense, which before the arrival of James Harden was predicated on passing, cutting, and moving, and changed a little bit with James Harden, but it's still an imperative part of the backbone of this franchise. And last but not least, wings are the most expensive position in basketball. They are the hardest position to find in basketball. And when you find a young, talented wingback, you know what you do? You hang on to him for dear life. And I said this before, and I'll say it again. The Nuggets did not want to lose Peyton Watson.
That's a tell-all right there.
Between the DeAndre Hunter trade and this move. The Hawks were willing to get off DeAndre Hunter. And Mac, you and I, we did a podcast, and this is my bad. This was your bad. We all overlooked the fact of, wow, Atlanta was willing to get rid of DeAndre Hunter for a price that none of us thought was going to be the actual price it would take to acquire him. There should have been a red flag that went up in our head. It didn't, and that's a hand-up bad job out of us as a collective. The Nuggets did not want to get rid of Peyton Watson. I cannot emphasize that strongly enough, and the Cavs were able to get him. They now have is he 22 or 23? I keep saying 22.
He's 23, if I'm not mistaken.
They have a 23-year-old wing who's 6'8" and stupid athletic, who, if nothing else, is already a very, very, very good perimeter point of attack defender.
Yep.
a good finisher, and an improving three-point shooter. If that was the max of Peyton Watson, he'd be a great fit. The dude's 23 and getting better. He could be worth $35 million in 2 years, Mac, if his trajectory as a player continues. I cannot emphasize this enough. There's no perfect move. There's no perfect fit. He's not the ceiling raiser like a LeBron James was back in 2011 when he went to Miami. Like, those guys don't change teams that often. But considering the circumstances, considering the pot of assets they had to get, and considering the fit and the need at the position, I don't get how people could be upset with the price they had to pay. If you want to eat at a Michelin star restaurant, you're not paying McDonald's prices, right? If you want a wing, a young, talented wing, you're not getting him for a second-round pick in Craig Porter Jr. I'm sorry. It's just not how it works. So this is the price. It's the price of admission, and it's the price you have to pay to get an ascending player at the most important position on the court. And more importantly, it's a position you did not have any depth at. And Mac, I want to ask you this. Have you given yourself even 30 seconds to think about a possible closing lineup of Don, James, Tyson, Watson at the 4, and either Evan or Jarrett at the 5? Because that's what gets me the most excited about the future lineup combinations that Kenny Atkinson has to play with now.
I love that you brought that up, because one of the big talking points around this deal, especially in the days leading up to it, was, hey, could this potentially cost you one of those young prospects in a Tyrese Proctor? Could it cost you Malik Thomas? Could it cost you Jalen Tyson? They kept Jalen Tyson, a player who had a pretty big breakout himself last year. And yeah, the playoff showing was what it was, but keeping a young, still developing prospect at that position, a position of need for the Cavaliers, is huge. And if you can throw that out there in a closing lineup, you have spacing, you have some defensive versatility, you have some size out there, guys who can move around. That's a good look. And I think the Cavaliers, for a team constructed like them, that like they are in the backcourt that they have, with two defenders that, let's just be honest, it's not pretty most of the time. They now have a terrific backline of defense, and Peyton Watson, along with keeping Jalen Tyson, gives them that flexibility from a lineup standpoint to kind of throw different looks at teams. If you need more of a rim protector standpoint, honestly, I don't know. Maybe you go with the Jarrett Allen, because Jarrett Allen is a very underrated rim protector. If you need somebody that can roam around defensively at the 5, somebody who is going to get pulled outside of the painted area against certain matchups like a Karl-Anthony Towns, you go the Evan Mobley route. If you need to slide Peyton Watson, very positionally versatile, to the 4, he can do that. I still think he's best at the 3, but having that versatility is really, really important, especially in an offseason where you lost your best and most versatile point of attack defender in Dean Wade. And I think Keon Ellis's loss, despite him not playing in the postseason, was still likely to be felt if they were not able to at least bring in one versatile wing from a defensive standpoint. And then getting Watson, a guy that can actually knock down that three-point shot. Granted, you do, like you mentioned, want to see that volume increase. Combining those two things is what the Cavaliers had been wanting this entire time. They got the defense out of Isaac Okoro, but they didn't have the offensive firepower from three-point distance. They got the defense out of Dean Wade, but they didn't get the consistency from three-point distance. They got the offensive versatility from Max Strus, and while Max was a pretty solid defender, underrated, pretty solid rebounder, underrated in that aspect, not nearly as adept at that end of the basketball as a Peyton Watson is. So he combines all of these things. And again, it is based upon a lone season. It is based upon a lot of hypotheticals and theoreticals, but the fit seems to be really clear here. And I'm really excited about what he could potentially bring to the table. I do have a few reservations in regards to some of the flaws in his game right now, but what 23-year-old player is without flaws? What 23-year-old are you bringing in and expecting you to carry you to a championship? No, he fits what they needed right now. And I think at the price that you paid to acquire him, it just makes so much sense to me, man.
And also the other options we were talking about were DeMar DeRozan, who just signed a vet minimum contract with Denver, by the way, and Jonathan Kuminga, who, by the way, if the Cavs wanted Jonathan Kuminga, he'd be a Cav. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. They would have made it done. They've been basically slow walking and slow playing this entire process because they had Peyton Watson in mind. Kuminga was, how do I phrase this properly? was patiently waiting for the Cavs to make up their mind before he did anything else. If the Cavs wanted Kuminga and they thought it was close, then Jonathan Kuminga would be a Cav. They'd still have Max Strus most likely, and Peyton Watson would be on another team. But they made a organizational decision that we don't think it's close between Peyton Watson and Jonathan Kuminga, because you don't have to give the assets to get Kuminga that you would have had to give up to get Peyton Watson. And they could have had Jonathan Kuminga multiple times.
Yeah.
It seemed like they were very close to signing Jonathan Kuminga, but it never actually came to fruition. Why? Because the Cavs weren't going to pivot to Kuminga until they knew they were completely out of the Watson running.
And Mikey, I just want to say this too, like for the fans out there that did want Jonathan Kuminga, I don't think anybody would have been against acquiring Jonathan Kuminga, because he himself would have solved a position of need for them, which in my opinion is just me. And I know we have conversed about this a few different times. I think he would have been best suited to play the backup 4, sometimes playing at the 3, to shore up that hole that is now left in Dean's absence. So again, I would have been happy with Jonathan Kuminga, but getting Peyton Watson was the proper course of action, and he was the number 1 target after the LeBron of it all.
Yeah, and they had the choice. And like they made it clear from the get-go, we're going Watson until that road is completely blocked off, then we'll pivot and figure out whether it's DeRozan, Kuminga, whoever else it may have been. So when the organization is all aligned, from the front office to the coaching staff, everyone, all their ducks in a row saying, this is the guy we want, and you can go and get him, it's a win, because they clearly have a vision for how to use him. They have a vision for how he fits in, and they have a vision for what this team can be with Peyton Watson in the mix in a loaded Eastern Conference now. So, you know, we could bicker and bemoan the little flaws in his game, but to your point, kid's 23. He's not going to be asked to be their number 1 option here. He might be their 4th, maybe even their 5th offensive option. Like, he's going to come in, he's going to provide and do a lot of the little dirty things that the Cavs, frankly, have needed the last couple of seasons. And if he takes another 10% jump from last year to next season, as he did from 2 years ago from this most recent season, the Cavs are getting dogged at the small forward position. And we could finally stop seeing all the tweets of, well, Kobe Altman's allergic to small forwards over 6'6". Like, they got 2 real ones now, and Jalen Tyson and Peyton Watson. And is that enough? Maybe and maybe not. We'll find out. This roster's still not perfect. I still have, just like you, questions about the backup big position. They don't really have a ton of depth behind Mobley and Allen. Thomas Bryant's back. Can you trust him? Is Naquan Tomlin going to take that next step? Is it Watson at the 4? Like, the roster's not perfect, but they're in a much better spot today than they were about 72 hours ago before this Peyton Watson deal all went down, Mac.
Yeah, and I think another thing that I'm really interested to see in terms of how they're going to bring this all home is how they manage to go about the reserve guard role. With Schroeder now out of the picture, you do have a couple of in-house options between Craig Porter Jr. and Malik Thomas and Tyrese Proctor, who I think may not necessarily a traditional point guard, but could earn those minutes. If they fail to enter the season with a solidified option there, they're not quite sold on Thomas there, or Craig Porter Jr., who I still have somewhat of a belief in, but man, it's getting to the point where it's kind of like crap or get off the pot in terms of that 3-point shot with him and the aggressiveness of his game on the offensive side of the basketball. But Peyton Watson, to tie things back to this, if they are unable to kind of shore up that position to a place where they like it in the early stages of the season, he kind of does give you another potential self-creator, because that, to me, is still an area that he could have proven, but there was a step forward made in that specific area of his game, and it's very clear with the film, but that alone is very helpful, because you're not always going to have to depend on Donovan Mitchell or James Harden in those lineups to create. You're not going to always have to ask them to create a bucket in a clutch situation. We have seen Peyton Watson do this a few different times just this past season. Now, I'm not advocating, obviously, for Peyton Watson to play backup point guard, but it is another potential lineup positive to having him available. And that, to me, is another thing that I think that he's going to surprise a lot of people with. And then one other thing that I kind of want to mention here, because I mentioned I would at least give Max Strus his due. I think that throughout his time here, Max Strus had been through a lot of ups and downs from an injury perspective. Obviously, that's not something that you can account for. But what I will say is this: when he was out there, he played his ass off. He showed a ton of heart. And no matter if he made a shot or he missed a shot, you always knew that the defense, at the very least, had to respect his ability to do that. The only other player on the roster that was not considered a role player that could do that, Sam Merrill. Sam Merrill remains here, and you're going to be asking a hell of a lot, in my opinion, out of Sam Merrill this season. But Max Strus was a pretty vital part of what this team does from a spacing standpoint. When you have two tremendous high usage, high drive guards like James Harden and Donovan Mitchell, you need guys who can space the floor. You need guys who can provide those open driving lanes. And if nothing else, if you're not a fan of Max Strus, if you're not somebody who truly value what he brought to the table, you have to recognize that there is a ton of value in the gravity that he brought to the table and the business-like and winning mentality that he brought to this team. So I just want to say thank you again to Max for kind of helping the Cavaliers take another step forward. And I'm hoping that, for lack of a better phrase, that his sacrifice and being moved to the Clippers, where he gets reunited with Darius Garland, which is pretty awesome, just objectively speaking. But I'm hoping that sacrifice that the Cavaliers made at the expense of Max Strus pays off, and that of Peyton Watson. And I'm willing to bet that it will. But I don't know. So much of this is hypothetical, man.
Yeah, well, two things with Strus. Well, one with Strus then ties into Harden. When they brought Strus in here, it was to bring that adult, veteran, I've been there before, voice to the locker room. You know, Donovan had never made a conference finals. Evan, Jarrett, young players. Darius, a young player. He was supposed to be that veteran leader, that guy that all the young guys could look at and say, he made the finals with Miami. This is how it's supposed to look. This is how it's supposed to operate. This is how a vet is supposed to be. And he played that role valiantly for the Cavs. Even if the on-the-court stuff maybe never fully lived up to the contract he signed, and the injuries did play a huge part in that. Locker room-wise, like, he was vital in that aspect. Now, fast forward to the present day, you have James Harden in the locker room. Donovan's now been to a conference finals. Evan and Jarrett are no spring chickens anymore. It's a much more veteran locker room, and they don't necessarily, I don't want to say don't need that, but it's not as much of a necessity to have, because the other guys aren't young pups anymore. They're older. They've been through some of the wars, and they've had Max alongside them for 3 years to help guide them through some of those trials and tribulations. And the one other thing I want to say, James Harden is low-key the X factor that allowed all this to happen. James Harden's been historically a guy that's been out for himself. I asked him the question after his first game in Cleveland. You know, you've changed teams. You've been called the mercenary. What's your take on that? And he said, hey, I got to do what's best for my family. If that means getting as much money as I can at each stop, that's what I'm going to do. And I respect the answer. That's everyone's own personal opinion. His patience and willingness to be flexible to allow the Cavs to operate and make all these other moves before they took care of James Harden says a lot about the place he's at in his career, about the player he is, about the leader he's kind of turned into. And I just want to give him his due credit, because he could have put the Cavs' feet to the fire, made them sign him first, which would have unallowed or basically made it impossible for them to acquire Peyton Watson via the multiple avenues they had to create money to get him. So James does deserve a ton of credit for being patient, for trusting the Cavaliers that they would make do on the deal, the wink-wink deal they made earlier, and also give the Cavs credit for saying, hey, we're going to make sure we get all the stuff done before we get to you, James, but we will take care of you, we promise. And that's how good team-player relationships are built. And it's not something James had to do. It's something he was willing to do. And according to reports, not only was he cooperative with the Cavs in terms of being financially flexible to get Watson, he was recruiting Watson player to player as well. So just want to give James his due diligence and his credit, because it's a very anti-James Harden move, traditionally speaking, to what he did this year. And it's all for the Cavs' benefit and his pursuit at winning his first NBA title.
Yeah, say what you want about James Harden and the flaws in his game on court, but I don't think anybody can question the fact that this man is willing to sacrifice in the name of championships. I think that obviously he could have made this a difficult process if he wanted to, but I think clearly he sees that there was an avenue for improvement for this team, and he recognized the flaws on the roster himself, and he was willing to grant them the runway to try and improve the roster by any means necessary. So props to him for that. To be honest with you, I don't really like, as much as people are talking about the contractual obligations of it all, the numbers of it all. To me, I don't really care as much, just because I feel like the window that you have, especially in this CBA now, very short. This could be a very short window in the James Harden era itself, but I still think there's something to be said about a guy that's willing to grant that ability for his own team, and just to remain patient before he even sees a payday. So that's pretty damn cool. I think that we're really going to experience a phenomenal season. Maybe not the one that people had in mind before this offseason began, before all the dreams of LeBron returning home, before Jaylen Brown or Giannis were a thought. But I think we're in store for a pretty solid season, and hopefully a step forward come the playoffs. Mikey, as always, thank you for joining on such short notice, and hopefully the Browns give people something to cheer for as play resumes. But appreciate it, man.
Anytime, Mac. Love talking Cavs with you. And the Bills just got stuffed on the 1 yard line. So looking up and up for the Browns.
All righty. Go Cavs.